and then we'll close up with a full panel discussion. So all yours, Lindsey.
Thanks, Whitney. Like Whitney said, my name is O'Brien, and I am the marketing manager at Lockstep. And I've been working pretty closely with our customers on our adoption services. So you might have heard in our previous sessions us talking about these adoption services. And they teach our customers how to get their customers and vendors to go online and use the online services that they provide. And so today, I'm going to talk about why and how you can be getting those customers to go online and why it's so important that we do that. So we'll start out with our mission, which is connect the world's accounting departments to make them more productive and successful. So we believe that taking the friction out of AR and AP collaboration has the power to free up working capital and empower finance professionals to focus on high-value activities. And the first step to that is creating reliable and compliant accounting relationships, which put simply is just ensuring that your AR and AP are in fact connected. So do you have the right contacts and information about each other? Are you acting in a compliant way? Do you have the right contacts for your AP or AR department, or do you just have the contact of who you sold to, the procurement or the buyer? And so you have to validate those contacts. Not having valid contacts causes a lot of problems just from the start in your relationship with AR and AP. So it could increase the calls that your staff has to make or the calls that they're then fielding. It can create issues with invoices or payments not being received and ultimately increase your aging. So we also found that this is more important than ever because of the pandemic. It's caused uncertainty, as many of you know, in businesses across the globe. So we found that according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, about 20.5 million Americans were laid off in April. And this could have affected some of your AR and AP contacts. So, you know, they might have been laid off, the business might have shuttered completely, or maybe they're out sick. And if you're sending to a personal inbox, it's likely that that person, you know, isn't forwarding their emails on, so your emails are not getting read at all. So how are you going to guarantee that you have cash flow continuity when you're sending to a personal inbox? The answer to this is making sure that the email address you have isn't a personal inbox, but a team inbox or a department inbox, like we're showing on this screen with ar@vendor.com or ap@thecustomerscompany.com. So making sure that you have those right contacts with a department email address instead of a personal one will ensure that you have cash flow continuity, because you can always guarantee when you're sending to a department email address that somebody is going to answer. And then once you've created that validation of your contacts, you can then establish your compliance, which means being audit ready. So vendors have to give customers a W-9. Customers have to give vendors a tax exemption certificate, and then they both have to exchange and record TINs and verify that the TIN matches the IRS to avoid fines. Compliance documentation is required for both financial audits and for accreditation. And you'll hear a little bit later in our panel discussion from one of our panelists. They work in a calibration business, and they'll lose accreditation if they don't have the correct documentation. So capturing all this information up front saves them from scrambling later on. So let's take a minute to look at vendor data. According to Apex Analytics, 2 out of 3 companies don't have a process for maintaining their vendor data. In the study that they conducted, they found that 35% of organizations acknowledge that they don't, that vendor data is a challenge for them. And then 38% of them, even though they might have the vendor data, they find that it's incomplete, so they're missing fields. And then less than 10% of them are monitoring that data continuously. So they get the data once, they're not updating it later on if any changes are made. And then in polling CFOs and controllers, they found that 94% of them don't trust the data that they have. And then they also found that 30% or more of vendor records have an error. And they did a case study, and in this case study, the company had 3,519 records. They found that 86 of them were duplicates, 120 were inactive, 68 had invalid tax IDs, and then over 500 had invalid bank details. And so then they had to correct over 1,500 street addresses, add over 2,000 telephone numbers, and add over 1,000 email addresses to their database to clean that data up. And it's not just vendor data, customer data can also have these same issues. And the number one reason why vendor and customer data is either incomplete or inaccurate is one simple reason, and that's time and effort. AR and AP departments typically do not have the time to be doing regular data cleansing. So first, companies find it difficult to collect the data just off the bat from orders and then validate it. Second, even if they get the data, companies don't know that the data provided can be trusted. For example, I was actually talking to a friend just the other day who works in AP, and they don't trust that their vendors are providing the right TIN numbers. They've been burned in the past where when it comes time to do 1099s, the TINs didn't match what the IRS had, and they were fined for it. So they now spend extra time validating these against the IRS database. And then third, to establish that trust, it can be time consuming and laborious. So another example, our CFO in a past position, she explained to us that they went through the process of doing a data cleanup. And she found that it took her on average an hour to update and cleanse each record that they had. So if you have thousands of customers or vendors, then you're doing thousands of hours of validation. And that costs you financially. So with the cash conversion cycle, which shows how much it, or how long it takes from the purchasing of your inventory to when you actually make money and collect the cash on your end. It's a great tool for assessing how well a company is managing its working capital. So with a shorter cash conversion time, it proves out that the company can generate more sales and profit from their working capital. And the APQC found that companies that ensure their master data is accurate have a lower cash conversion cycle, which is the more preferred days, around 56 days. And that organizations that don't clean up and don't focus on their data accuracy, they're more at around 71 days, which is not as ideal. So if you find yourself in that bottom performing ranking for the cash conversion cycle, it's recommended that you start looking at your master data first. So in other words, clean data is generating better financial performance. And finance plays a key role in this. You're the front lines against data that's incorrect. If bank details change or if addresses change, you're going to be the first one that knows. The customer or their vendor is going to come to you to let you know, or you're going to start seeing the issues from that missing data first. So finance has a key role in ensuring that the cash conversion cycle is on that lower scale of days. And the secret to clean data is really simple. It's just email addresses. So we're used to gathering information like TIN, and that's important in understanding vendors and customers, but it's just not as powerful as an email address. And the reason for that is because an email address is a universally unique identity for an accounting department. If you think about it, nobody else in the world has the same email address as you. Think back to when you got your first email address, and most likely you tried to get your name at AOL.com, but they didn't have it. So you had to add 6 numbers on the end is what they suggested for you. The same thing with accounting departments. they're not going to allow two accounting departments to have the same email address. The email address lets you communicate with any company on the globe. So I think every one of us would be pretty shocked if we were told that a company had no email address. And then an email address allows you to automate your communications and workflows. All you need to do automation is have an email address. And so an email address has the power to transform the vendor and customer data management that we're doing. Modern data management is based on digital techniques. So who knows your customer and vendor data better than those customers and vendors themselves? Instead of taking the manual time and effort for us to be scouring, looking for the information for our customers and vendors, why not just ask them to review, update, and validate their own data? So with modern data management, you can collect data and documentation online, automate follow-ups, allow an incorrect contact to reroute the request, flag and resolve exceptions, and then share your data digitally too. So we'll get into each one of those. And the first is sharing that information online. So with Lockstep, we send out an email similar to the one that you see on the screen here. And that email comes out and gives them a magic link. And you can see that here with the verify information button. And when they click on that secure link, which doesn't require them to have a password for a portal, it's just a secure link that takes them there, a secure unique link. They are then brought to an online form where they can verify their information. And with this online form, they can update their entire profile if you need TIN numbers, if you need phone numbers, any of that information that you're requiring. And once that's updated, the information is then synced back to your ERP. And it's possible that you could be collecting this information manually. So you might be looking at invoices, contracts, checking company websites or LinkedIn pages, or even calling the vendor or customer. But imagine how much time that would take to track down all that information when you can just send out an email and have them fill out that information online. And then you can do record verification. So once they make those profile updates, you can now see who did it and at what time, which establishes more trust in the data and also supports your audit logs. And then it also provides a self-correcting process. So about 10 to 12 invoices are sent to an address that's not an accounts payable department. So whether it's procurement or a buyer, and that problem isn't often discovered until the first invoice is sent out and it ages past due. And if you're lucky, that recipient will forward the invoice to accounts payable, but unfortunately this doesn't always happen. So what's included in the email address or in the emails that are sent out are a link that says, please click here to let us know who we should be sending these to. So if you did forward it, or if you did send it to procurement, then they can just forward it easily by clicking this link to the AP department. And it acts as that self-correcting process. And who will know the better contact for you than somebody that's inside of that organization? And then you can automate your follow-up. So you can see here in Lockstep, if you're going through your regular to-do list, you probably tackle the things that are, most important first, and then you put off some of the other things until later. But then what happens when you put off those other things till later? You might forget about them completely. And so when you're using Lockstep, you actually can get reminders to complete those tasks that you put off until later. So you can see here, you need to make a call, and that's at the top of your bucket of things to do. And then finally, you can share your own profile. So you might need to share your profile with a vendor or with a customer, and that's easily done by simply clicking a link to share your profile. And then all of your information that they need to collect to ensure that their master data is up to date is completed. So we know that no process really goes off without a hitch. So how do you detect those issues, and then how do you handle them? And we found the best way to do this is using a combination of TIN and email addresses to flag exceptions. So if TINs match and emails don't, it's either an error or multiple AR or AP departments in a larger entity. If the TINs don't match but the emails do, it's either an error or a shared service across taxpaying identities. And then if the TINs match and the emails match, you've obviously found a duplicate. And then if the email address is a personal email address, we recommend best practice that you ask them to instead provide you with a team inbox, a departmental email address. And in cases of these, you can just contact them to resolve it in any of these exceptions. And then where can you be using, like where can you put to practice some of these like data management policies that we've talked about? The first and the easiest way is during your onboarding process. So right off the bat, get your relationship with your customers and vendors set up right by doing onboarding, sending out that online form to them as soon as they become a customer or a vendor. During reactivation, so maybe you have a customer that went inactive and now they are active again, ask them to go in and fill out that form and update any changes that might have happened during the time of inactivation. During an anniversary, so using automation, you can set up reminders for yourself that on the 1 year or 2 year anniversary, annually on their anniversary, to remind you to send out that online form to your customers to update any information that might have changed over the past year. And by doing these onboarding, reactivation, anniversaries, you're weaving this into your accounting operations. So then when it comes time to, so then it's not really coming time to do a data refresh. You're not having to do a big batch of refreshing the entire database. You might have to do this once up front before you weave all of these into your, all these other onboarding and anniversary into your processes. But once you get it done once, then it's just a continual process of keeping things clean. So overall, when you're maintaining reliable, compliant data, you're ending up with a better cash conversion cycle. You're creating less work for yourself in the long run, and you're implementing stronger compliance. So we're going to have our panel join us now. We have Jessica Taylor, who is the AR manager at Mid-States Bolton Screw. We have Scott Garger, who is the Senior of Business Development at Creditsafe. And then we have Bill Henslee, who is the CEO of E2B Technologies. And we also have Matt Shanahan from Lockstep.
Great, Lindsey. Thank you for a great informative presentation. And thank you, panel, for joining us. I was hoping we could get a little bit of background on kind of each of your companies just before we get into our roundtable discussion. So Bill, I might start with you, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about E2B Technologies.
Sure. So E2B Technologies, we have a national calibration lab, which is ISO 17025 accredited. We have approximately 350 vendors, and we have, probably 500 or so active customers at any one time. And we serve customers. Basically, the customers that we serve will be anybody that has any compliance requirements. So it would be a customer that has like ISO 9000, maybe an FDA requirement or FAA requirement.
Great. And Jessica, maybe, so Jessica unfortunately doesn't have a camera, but she is joining us today. So thank you very much. Could you give us a little bit of background about Mid-States?
Sure. We are an ISO 9001 accredited company. We are an industrial supplier. We basically supply anything and everything from paper products that are needed in cribs to fasteners that are needed on assembly lines. Safety, MRO, we do large scale kitting for companies that do prefabs. So We're very busy, very active company, lots of AR.
Great. Thank you very much. Scott, a little bit of background about Creditsafe.
Of course, we're a global credit data provider. It's kind of a three-pronged. What we have is credit and risk data, which is business credit scores on companies across the globe. Also compliance, risk and compliance data. So a little bit of a different type of compliance. We help with anti-money laundering checks, PEP and sanctions list, politically exposed person, tracing, investigation, ID verification in certain countries. And then also data services and analytics, where we could do customer profiling, analyze a whole AR or vendor ledger, and just really slice it and dice it and come up with different business strategies based on the global data we have. And we have 24 offices in 3 continents, about 110,000 customers, and about 220,000 users across the globe.
Great, thank you. So as we were getting ready for this discussion, we actually, as we discussed yesterday, are making Lockstep an early access, basically to solve this problem around customer and vendor data management. And a lot of that came from discussions with customers, customers like Jessica and Bill and others, that really, when we looked at what's the problem we're trying to solve, how do we take that friction out, this problem kept coming up again and again. And Bill, I don't know if, I always remember kind of the discussion we had, and you talked first about just like the vendor data. And so maybe you could kind of share that piece, and you're one of our early access people too. So,
right.
Talk about that.
Yeah, so you talk about accurate data and compliance and that. Well, essentially the calibration lab, that's what we do. I mean, that's what the business is about. It's about, accurate data. And to that, so with, I mentioned we have about 350 vendors. We actually have to maintain an active vendor list. We are required through our certification to, depending on the type of vendor, it's either annually or every 2 years, we actually have to do a questionnaire, get profile information like, who's the contacts, who's the quality contacts, who's the accounting contacts, basic company information, some accounting information as well. And that is a requirement that we have to do per our accreditation. And so literally we have a person who has a job responsibility to maintain this information internally. And in fact, in the process of being audited for our accreditation, what happens is the auditor comes in and they'll do a sampling to see that we actually did get all this, they'll go through and pick out, 20 vendors of ours, and then want to see all the evidence that shows that we actually got the information from the vendors. So. And
what's the implication if it's not right?
You get marked up. It's a ding on your accreditation report. So it's called a finding. And then actually a vendor finding could be, more critical than just a minor finding. It's like one of those things that are very, taken seriously, because our relationship with our vendors are important because we're relying on them to provide services.
And you had also mentioned that you have a similar challenge around customers.
Yeah, so we have, yes, absolutely. So on the customer side, we actually have to have, well, as you can imagine, we're accredited. So, companies that are ISO or FAA or whatever, they're being audited as well, and they want to see our credentials. So we go through the same process with our customers that we're doing with our vendors. So we have to supply, all this information to our customers. We have a couple of different templates depending on what the type of customer it is that we're providing that information to. But yeah, we have to provide that as well. It is a challenge.
Great. Jessica, I was hoping that you could talk about some of the challenges you and I had talked about. Like, I think there's a process around tax exemption certificates, if I remember right, that periodically that you need to do a refresh.
Yeah, we actually, a large part of our customer base is based in the state of Michigan, but we do have other, we have 9 branches in other states, Ohio, North Carolina. We have customers all over the world. So we have different tax certificates that we need to maintain, and they all have different intervals with which they expire. So it really is dependent upon how they filled out the form, and depending on which state. And then the amount of business they do. For instance, there's in the state of Michigan, you can fill out the certificate so that it is a recurring certificate as long as there is at least 1 sale per year. Well, how do I manage that? How do I know that? How do I know if this customer is expired in 3 years or 4 years, or if they've really purchased, you know, within that time frame every 12 months? Consecutively to keep the certificate active. There are definite challenges with that. And additionally, we actually have over 7,500 customers. About 2/3 are active at any one time. So the sheer scale of sending out the number of credit or the number of tax certs that we need to send out to update is daunting, to say the least. In years past, we've actually done a hard copy printout of all of the tax certs, because it was the only way we could have to code them up in the corner with the customer number, so that when we received those documents back, we didn't have to try to search for the name or the DBA, which, as you know, can be confusing when you're trying to look up accounts, just so that we could upload the information and make sure it was accurate. So we've spent quite a lot of time and energy just updating tax certs in the past. It was definitely not the best solution. We needed a better, better way to do that going forward. So we're looking for a lot of options where we can send that manually as soon as first of all, we have to, track the expiration date. We have to track the sale or no sale, depending on how the tax cert was filled out, the recurring. And then we have to make sure that we're sending those out before they expire so that there's time to get that back. And then once we do get that back, we need to make sure that that information is flowing to our ERP accurately.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's definitely a daunting challenge when you think about that complexity. And let's get back into the notion of a compliant relationship with your customers or vendors, and being able to have all that. We also talked about the notion of a reliable relationship. Is how do you know that you're sending even the notification to the right email address? When we were talking, I had asked the question about, do you ever get incorrect contact data, and does that impact your invoicing at all? Curious if you've seen that.
Absolutely. And unfortunately more often than we should, because we do have a process whereby we ask for the correct email address for billing during our credit application process, but we don't really have a verification process. So we are loading that information into our system, and we're hoping that we read it right, we're hoping that we typed it right, we're hoping that it emailed out properly, and we're hoping that it's still an active inbox and somebody's looking at it, because, in the cases that we've found, it's 30 days beyond terms or even 60 days beyond terms before I'm made aware that there's an issue. And then, I've called the customer, and the first thing they say is, oh, well, she hasn't been here in like weeks. Like, we don't even, think she works here anymore. Like, and so that's, okay, thanks, but I was using her email for something pretty important. So, right. Yeah, that's a real big challenge. And the verification process that you guys are implementing would be amazing for us.
Well, I'm sure we'll be talking more about this after the conference, but yeah, your perspective is helpful. I mean, it's exactly these conversations that have been kind of guiding our investment. You know, in digital transformation, it's interesting, part of that's been part of our conversation really the last couple of days. And Peter yesterday, I thought it was great that he sort of went back to the 1860s and explained, you know, why totals go in and how, you know, a point in time kind of traps you into, you know, a process, and it suddenly becomes momentum and you keep doing it. Scott, when we were chatting, you had a kind of a great story that started about the same time as Peter's about, you know, the 1860s. I thought it would be interesting to share your perspectives on how technology evolution is even impacting your business. You're on mute.
Surely that had to happen once during this call. Sorry about that. But in the credit, you're right. In the credit agency space, obviously it's the same thing. I mean, one thing is the obvious: data is now gathered electronically. In the 1860s, and all the way up through, I could just talk about U.S. Credit rating data. Things were gathered by field reporters who would go out to a business and with a pad and paper and write down what the building looks like, look at the company ledgers, and hopefully those weren't doctored, and right, all those sorts of things would happen. But it's obviously evolution has taken us to a point where in the mid 80s we were faxing credit reports to each other, right? And then all of a sudden people started these crazy things called websites in the mid to late 90s, and everybody wanted to own one and make money off of one. And then people were logging into a website to get their credit information. And now it's, we've seen a very strong shift to working integrations within ERP and CRM systems. So it's eliminating the use for a website from a credit rating agency, where you could be working within your portal of choice, like a Salesforce or an Anytime Collect, Sage, SAP, whatever the case may be, and pull in credit data and fields into that interface or instance. So that's where we see things really going, and also as well as a lot more automated decisions. If a lot of companies would have to take maybe a couple days to make a credit decision, maybe a couple hours, 25 minutes, 30 minutes. Now there's companies who are making 90, 80% of smaller onboarding credit decisions under a certain dollar threshold automatically by building scorecards. So it's things have just become a lot faster, obviously in this space where, like we were talking about back in the day, you'd be able to walk into a library and pull out the old book and look at the credit ratings. Now it's obviously progressed into where this is just via API into whatever you want it to go into, essentially.
Absolutely. So yeah, thank you. I thought it was a fascinating kind of history. I think you even said Abraham Lincoln started out in the industry.
Yes, he worked for one of our industry competitors, and that was one of his first jobs, was doing field reporting and gathering information on businesses, just as you can imagine it, knocking door to door and finding out what the business is up to and collecting the financial statements and that sort of thing.
And so, it really is kind of back to this question around digital transformation, and technology adoption, and whether it's accelerating or not. Jessica, I'd be curious for mid-states if kind of the pandemic and some of that has kind of raised the priority or certainly the awareness. Just curious your thoughts on that.
I would say absolutely. I mean, there was a time when I was working from home during the early stages, and there were definite challenges to that. One of them was, it sounds kind of silly, but just printing. I mean, in the office, we don't even think about it. We just print. We put it in there, hard copy, hard copy goes in the folder, it goes in the file cabinet. But at home, it's not realistic to print the amount of data on a home printer that we do here in the office. And what you're talking about, and also what Scott is talking about, having that credit application or that credit decision document, just being able to save that on an account level without having to print anything, that would have been amazing. That would have been a real time saver for us. Some of the other problems that I came into is so much of what we were doing, of course, was remote and individual. So data sharing was difficult because not everyone is on the same platform. For instance, I'm one of the principal users of Anytime Collect as the software. So a lot of what I was doing within the system, a lot of the note-taking I was making, communications I was notating, no one else really was seeing that, and there was this disconnect in between that, and so that could have definitely gone smoother. And I feel like we really could just benefit from a wider access to data, even if it doesn't mean that everybody has access to all of the data, but if there's a way to kind of export some sort of a brief synopsis of the day's activities, the week's activities, something like that. Just a better way to for the information to flow to parties that are not within an office.
Yep, totally makes sense. Bill, I'd love to get your perspective on kind of what you're seeing relative to technology adoption.
Well, yeah, I think that, if I just describe the process that I mentioned with the vendor management that we have, so, like in our case, to manage that whole process, it's done through Outlook. It's we're using email to request this information from customers and vendors, typically in our case vendors. And we looked at, we actually created shared mailboxes in Outlook and things like that. But even that concept, trying to do that within Outlook has been a challenge in that. So now we initiate a discussion in Outlook. Somebody has a phone call discussion with a vendor and ask them for information. They respond to the personal email address as opposed to the Outlook one. So now it's in a personal thread. And so just getting all this information into one place has been a challenge. It's a very, manual process, and I don't know. Yeah. You
had mentioned something about customer contacts being.
Yeah, and so I discovered too. We have like 3 different systems that we could maintain customer contacts in. We have a CRM system, we have the Sage ERP system, and then we have Anytime Collect. And so I recently did some investigating around this topic and to find out how we go about maintaining customer contact information. And so I found the person that also is responsible for maintaining the vendor relationships also manages customer contact information. And we literally have a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet that has a list of, I think like 800 email addresses for our 500 active customers or something. And that's how we maintain it. It's like crazy. It's like we can't decide where to put it, so we
put it in Lockstep, right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I'm like, it should be an Anytime Collect, but somebody didn't ask me about that. So, but yeah, again, it's that, where does the information go? And we need a central common place and we're collecting the same information that other people are. And it's just, crazy how it actually, you talk about a cash trap. This is a time trap, just maintaining it, right? So, yeah.
Totally. Scott, I'm curious what you're seeing in terms of how the pandemic has influenced kind of the technology adoption mindset in your customer base.
It's an interesting question because it could go on forever, but there's been a lot of different reactions. But the main thing I've seen is that people or customers that we have that have been doing things by traditional means, and not by traditional means technology-wise, by maybe just what their company's principles were, have changed, and they also need information quicker. Especially, I've been lucky enough to deal with companies over the summer who have very large ARs, and they really needed to do quick customer analysis. Not only on what's in their internal ledger, because what's in their internal ledger is one view, but also the credit risk perspective. You know, how risky is this company? Are they in an essential versus non-essential industry? Are they in regions where there's a COVID outbreak, where there's shutdowns? So we really needed to supply that type of information very quickly to our customer base to you know, let them predict their next quarter's bad debt reserves, to you know, see who to you know, maintain and monitor the relationship with or take immediate action on. You know, there's always the case of the dental practice that's been around for 30 years and very steady. Well, now they lost 3 months, 4 months worth of business in some areas. How's that going to impact the relationship with them? And that's happening across all industries. And customers have just needed that, and prospects have needed that information quicker so they could do quicker analysis. I think that's the main thing. And then the second part is just the strategy change. It's a lot of the companies I talk to, their onboarding of new customers has been down because of the economic situation we are in some industries. Some industries it's gone up, but mostly down. And then they're really doing where they used to drive a lot of their efforts into sales operations, they're now driving into credit risk mitigation. You know, making sure that, again, that they're collecting money that's out there on high risk customers, and you know, finding out really who they are and what strategy to take with them. That's probably the biggest change I've seen from my perspective, at least.
Yeah, well, and you bring up a great point from you know, the emphasis perspective. I mean, we're starting to see that a lot. You know, a lot of times people will talk about growth, right? They put money into sales and marketing, product development, really trying to fuel a growth pattern. And don't always think then about efficiency. You know, are we doing things operationally the best way? So the back office oftentimes gets overlooked in terms of, you know, technology investments and stuff. And Jessica, I'd be curious if that resonates with what you're seeing for your own organization, that there is more focus on operational efficiency in the midst of all this.
Yeah, absolutely. We've kind of put several projects on the forefront that had been what you would probably call backburnered previous to COVID, just because you know, we're so sales driven. You know, we're so forward motion that a lot of times I feel like accounting is running to catch up. I am, just frankly. But we've made a real push to start you know, scanning data electronically, stop hard copy, you know, keeping everything. And, you know, we're really trying to go forward with different communication platforms, or we're reviewing different communication platforms for that very reason, so that we're really making sure that we're sharing the information that we have, you know, timely with people, but we're actually trying to make better credit decisions earlier, not waiting. And then we're also trying to make sure that we're not hampered by, you know, by those time constraints where we're waiting for data, or we're, you know, a lot of times, you know, you put something back in the sales rep's hands because you're not getting anywhere. Well, that doesn't get you anywhere either, usually, just saying.
Right.
So, you know, we're really trying to take a hard look at some of our processes and really streamline everything that we can and push towards a more digital, you know, like bar, so that we can really get there.
That's awesome. That's great perspective. Thank you. So, you know, again, to the panel, I really appreciate your time today and your perspectives. You bring some great insight, because, you know, I'm one of those marketing people. I'm always out promoting, but really people want to hear from peers like yourself. So I really appreciate that, and taking time out of a busy day, because certainly, Jessica, as you said, you're still running to catch up on things. So really appreciate everybody's time. Lindsey, maybe we could go to the next slide. I did want to remind everybody that Lockstep has entered into early access. So the digital onboarding capability, which we Lindsey showed earlier is available for use. To register for that, you could either, as a customer, contact your account manager. If you're not yet a customer of Lockstep, certainly visit lockstephq.com and register for early access, where I'd be happy to talk to you about it and solve some more problems for you. If we go to the next slide, as I mentioned, and Lindsey and Whitney talked about it earlier, we have launched connectedaccounting.org. It's a community site. What we're really trying to do is talk about digital transformation. Yesterday we mentioned the fact that almost 40% of invoicing is still done on paper. How do we get off of paper and at least go digital with email? And then how do we keep moving up to getting to the point where Scott talked about with real-time APIs, really fueling the process and being able to exchange data with trading partners that way. We want to help in that conversation. The conversation should be around anything from digital transformation techniques, standards, approaches, skill sets, quite frankly. That's another one that is a big topic. What kinds of skills does the modern accounting department need, especially as it pertains to technology? So I encourage you to join in the conversation. We're happy to respond. We're also bringing in more experts all the time, and we'd love to have you participate.